Long Beach, 1967. Nearly 2,000 people in folding chairs, the air thick with cigarette smoke and expectation. Most of them had come to see him move. Bruce Lee didn't enter like a celebrity. He walked in lightly, almost narrow in the shoulders under a dark suit, eyes alert but unreadable. The applause rose anyway, warm, confident. They trusted what they'd heard. The speed, the control, the stories. He stood at center stage and spoke quietly. Not long. Just enough. Then he asked for a volunteer. At first, it felt routine. Demonstrations always needed a body, a partner, someone willing to hold still and look impressed. But this man didn't look impressed. He was taller, heavier through the chest. A professional heavyweight fighter, people whispered. The kind of man who was used to being the most dangerous person in the room. He didn't bow. He stepped forward. There was a brief pause, so small most would miss it. Bruce's eyes lifted. Not surprised, just measuring. The audience shifted in their seats. What had been a demonstration tilted. And then the heavyweight moved first. Before the heavyweight ever stepped forward, the room already belonged to Bruce. You could feel it in the way people leaned in when he adjusted the microphone. Not loud devotion. Not cheering, just attention. The kind that tightens quietly. He was only in his 20s then. Still young enough that some older masters dismissed him in private. But in that hall, he wasn't a rumor. He had been training since he was 13. Years of discipline that didn't show in bulk or height, but in how he stood. Balanced. Ready without looking ready. A few well-known instructors were scattered through the audience. You could spot them by posture alone. Arms folded, faces unreadable. They weren't there for inspiration. They were there to evaluate. Bruce didn't perform for them. He spoke calmly about efficiency. About eliminating what was unnecessary. His voice didn't rise to impress. It didn't need to. People listened because he wasn't trying to win them. He was explaining something he had already decided was true. Then, he demonstrated a simple movement. A straight lid punch. It didn't look violent. It didn't even look fast at first. But the assistant holding the pad reacted before most people processed the sound. A sharp crack. A slight recoil through the shoulder. The kind of impact that makes you blink. There was a ripple through the crowd. Not applause yet. Something more cautious. Bruce reset his stance and invited someone closer to feel the distance. He showed how close was too close. How space could collapse without warning. He wasn't theatrical. No shouting. No exaggerated ki. Just angles. Timing. A hand moving where it was supposed to move, and still there was tension. Because some people in that room were fighters, real ones, boxers, karate champions. Men used to measuring power in bruises and broken noses. They watched his small frame and waited for the trick. When he asked for a volunteer, it didn't feel like a climax. It felt like a test. There was a second, just one, where no one stood. That silence carried weight. Then a chair scraped the floor. The sound cut clean through the hall. Heads turned before bodies did. The heavyweight didn't rush. He rose steadily, shoulders wide beneath his jacket. His expression wasn't hostile, but it wasn't cooperative either. You could see it in the way a few instructors shifted in their seats. This wasn't the usual eager student. Bruce watched him approach. No smile. No frown, just a small narrowing of the eyes, like someone adjusting focus. The heavyweight climbed the steps without waiting to be invited. That was the first change. The crowd felt it. The air tightened. What had been a demonstration of ideas was now something else. Not announced, not declared, just understood. Bruce stepped back half a pace to give space. The heavyweight didn't bow. He stood close. Closer than expected, and for the first time that afternoon, Bruce didn't speak immediately. He just looked at the distance between them. The heavyweight didn't ask what to do. That was the first thing I noticed. Most volunteers looked toward the instructor, waiting for instruction, waiting to be placed. This man didn't. He squared his shoulders and stood firm, chin slightly lifted, the way fighters do when they've already accepted the exchange. Bruce gestured lightly. Just a small motion of the hand. Stand naturally. His voice stayed even. The heavyweight nodded once, but his stance didn't soften. If anything, it widened. His feet rooted to the floor. He wasn't there to hold a pad. He was there to measure. A few people in the front rows leaned forward. You could hear fabric shifting, a cough that never finished. Bruce explained the distance again. How close was too close, how speed erased space. He raised his hand to demonstrate positioning. That's when it happened. The heavyweight moved first. Not wildly, not recklessly, but deliberately, his arm coming forward as if to test, to intercept, to prove something about range. It wasn't part of the script. There was a flicker across Bruce's face. Not surprise. Adjustment. The room tightened. This wasn't cooperative energy anymore. It was competitive. Bruce didn't retreat fully. He shifted his weight just enough. A subtle angle change. His front foot turned slightly inward. The heavyweight pressed again, closing distance another inch, chest almost touching Bruce's forearm. Someone near me whispered, "Oh, it wasn't fear. It was recognition." This had changed. Bruce lowered his center of gravity without bending visibly. His shoulders relaxed further, which somehow made him look more dangerous. "Relax," he said quietly. But the heavyweight didn't. You could see it in the tension along his jaw, in the way his breathing shortened just a little. Not from exertion. From pride. Bruce extended his hand again, slower this time, demonstrating the line of attack. And again. The heavyweight interrupted the motion, this time with more commitment. A real forward pressure. Not a punch. Not yet. But force. The kind that says, "I'm not here to help you look good." There was a murmur from the back rows, not loud, just enough to register. Bruce's head tilted slightly. Then he stepped in. It was so small most people missed it, not backward. In. The heavyweight hesitated for half a second, caught between pushing and resetting. That hesitation hung in the air like a held breath. Bruce's hand hovered inches from the man's chest. No strike. Just presence. Just control of the line. They were close enough now that you could see the difference in size clearly. The heavyweight outweighed him by at least 40 pounds. Maybe more. But the size gap wasn't what people were watching anymore. They were watching the eyes. The heavyweights had narrowed. Bruce's hadn't changed at all. Then the heavyweight tried again, this time with full intent. The second attempt wasn't subtle. The heavyweight surged forward, shoulder leading, intent clear now. Not demonstration pressure. Not curiosity. A real drive. There was a sound shoes sliding hard against wood. Bruce didn't brace the way most men would. He didn't widen his stance or plant deeper. He shifted, just a small pivot off the center line, his lead foot carving a quiet arc across the floor. His rear hand rose, not high, not dramatic, just enough to intercept the line of force. Contact. Not a clash, more like a redirection. The heavyweight's momentum didn't stop, it folded. His upper body pitched forward a fraction too far. His front foot searched for ground that wasn't where he expected it to be. And then it happened. A visible imbalance. Not a fall. Not humiliation. But a stumble. His weight tipped past his base, and he had to take a quick, corrective step to keep from dropping to a knee. The sound of that step-heavy sudden echoed louder than any strike could have. The room inhaled. All at once. Bruce's hand was still lightly connected to the man's arm. Not gripping. Not forcing. Just guiding. He released immediately. No flourish. The heavyweight straightened, face flushing deeper than before. For a moment, he didn't look at Bruce. He looked at the floor, as if recalculating where it had shifted. Bruce stepped back half a pace. That was the second change. He wasn't crowding him. He wasn't pressing the advantage. He was giving him space to reset publicly, but without shame. A few people began to clap. It died quickly. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was something closer to exposure. The heavyweight rolled his shoulders once, jaw tight. Pride doesn't disappear in front of 2,000 people, it hardens. Bruce waited. He didn't explain what had happened. Didn't lecture about angles or leverage. He just gestured again, calm as before. Once more. No edge in his voice. The heavyweight nodded, slower this time. When they closed distance again, the energy was different. Not reckless now. Measured. He moved forward carefully, trying to control the line, trying to keep his balance centered, his feet placed more deliberately, his hands tighter. Bruce met him halfway. Another small pivot. Another quiet interception. This time, instead of redirecting fully, he applied a brief forward pressure sharp, contained. The heavyweight's breath broke. You could hear it from the front rows. A short, involuntary exhale as his posture buckled for a split second under the timing. Not pain. Disruption. Bruce stepped away immediately. The silence afterward felt heavier than the impact. No one laughed. No one cheered. They had just seen something undeniable. The heavyweight stood upright again, but his shoulders were no longer squared the same way. For the first time since he'd stepped on stage, he looked like a man thinking instead of proving. And Bruce? He looked exactly the same as when he walked in. For a few seconds, neither man moved. It wasn't confusion. It was recalibration. The heavyweight adjusted his stance again. But this time the movement was smaller. Less show. More care. His hands hovered closer to his body. Elbows tucked. He wasn't trying to test distance anymore. He was trying to understand it. Bruce watched without expression. Someone near the aisle shifted in their seat. The sound felt too loud in the quiet. The heavyweight circled half a step to his left. Bruce mirrored him without thinking. Not fast. Not tense. Just there. You could sense it now. The room had changed sides. Not in loyalty. In awareness. The audience wasn't wondering if Bruce was legitimate anymore. They were watching how he handled restraint. The heavyweight feinted forward. Bruce didn't react. That was the third change. A ripple of surprise passed through the front rows. The feint had been sharp, believable. Any ordinary demonstrator might have flinched, even slightly. Bruce's eyes didn't blink. The heavyweight committed again this time, slower, more technical. His arms shot forward, controlled, not reckless. He aimed to trap the lead hand, to pin it, to impose weight. Their forearms met. There was a brief, tight exchange, too subtle to call a fight. Just pressure and counter-pressure. Each adjusting by inches, each searching for dominance in the smallest space possible. Bruce shifted his hips a fraction, and the line collapsed again. Not violently. Just enough. The heavyweight's structure bent at the waist for a second before he corrected it. His heel lifted, then settled. Another breath from the crowd. Bruce released contact. He stepped back. And something unexpected happened. The heavyweight didn't chase him. He stood still. That was new. His shoulders lowered slightly. The tension in his jaw eased, not gone, but softened. He nodded once, almost to himself. Bruce gave a short bow. No announcement. No explanation. The demonstration was over. Applause rose hesitant at first, then fuller, not explosive, not theatrical. It rolled through the hall like delayed thunder. The heavyweight stepped down from the stage without looking angry, without looking defeated either, just quieter. Bruce remained at center stage a moment longer. He adjusted his sleeve as if nothing unusual had occurred. But you could see it in the audience. Men who had entered with folded arms now leaned forward, elbows on knees. Conversations didn't start right away. People looked at each other first, searching for confirmation that they had seen what they thought they saw. Efficiency. Control. Timing over mass. Bruce thanked the audience simply. His voice was steady, unchanged. If he felt anything about what had just happened, he didn't show it, and that restraint may have impressed them more than the technique. As the applause faded, there was no celebration in his posture. Only stillness. The chairs didn't scrape right away. That's what I remember most. Usually, when a demonstration ends, people stand quickly. They stretch, they talk over each other. The spell breaks, not this time. The applause faded, but the room stayed seated. Bruce stepped off the stage without ceremony. A few students moved toward him, careful not to crowd. He listened more than he spoke. Nodded, answered briefly. His breathing looked normal, no sign of strain. Across the aisle, the heavyweight stood alone for a moment. No one rushed him either. He adjusted his jacket slowly, smoothing the front as if resetting himself back into the role he knew. His face wasn't angry. It wasn't embarrassed. It was thoughtful. Two men approached him, fighters, by the look of their shoulders. They spoke quietly. The heavyweight shook his head once, then said something short. One of them glanced toward the stage. The change wasn't loud, it was in posture. Men who had arrived to measure Bruce now carried themselves differently. Less rigid, less certain. A few even smiled, not wide, not admiring, just acknowledging something they hadn't expected to acknowledge. Near the back rows, someone reenacted the pivot with his hands, trying to explain it to a friend. The friend shook his head, unconvinced, then paused, and stopped arguing. The heavyweight began walking toward the exit. He passed within a few feet of Bruce. For a split second, their eyes met. No words, just a nod, small, almost imperceptible. And then he kept walking. That nod weighed more than the stumble, because it wasn't forced. The hallway outside the hall filled slowly. Conversations broke into clusters, not loud debates, more like quiet recalculations. A few older instructors stood apart, hands behind their backs. One of them let out a soft exhale and said, "Fast, nothing more." Bruce remained inside longer than most. He packed nothing himself. Others handled the equipment. He stood near the stage, speaking calmly to a young student who looked shaken, not frightened, just awakened to something new. There had been no knockout, no dramatic fall, no humiliation, just timing, and that made it harder to dismiss. When I finally stepped outside, the sun felt too bright, the air cooler than before. The world looked the same, but the mood had shifted. Some left inspired, others unsettled. That stayed with people. By the time the parking lot began to empty, the story had already started changing. Not in facts, in tone. Small circles formed near car doors left open. Engines idled while conversations stretched longer than planned. A few men demonstrated footwork on asphalt, careful not to scuff their dress shoes. Others stood with arms folded, replaying it silently instead of speaking. No one argued loudly. That was the strange part. In martial arts circles, disagreement is usually quick and sharp. Styles defend themselves. Pride flares. But that afternoon, pride moved slower. Inside the hall, a janitor swept beneath the stage where the two men had stood. The scuff marks from their shoes were faint but visible if you looked closely, just small arcs in the dust. Evidence of angles most hadn't noticed in real time. Bruce left through a side exit. No entourage. No dramatic farewell. A few students followed at a respectful distance. He walked lightly, hands at his sides, gaze forward. If he replayed the moment in his mind, it didn't show. Across the lot, the heavyweight leaned against his car before getting in. He wasn't talking now. His jacket hung open. The afternoon breeze moved the fabric slightly, then stilled again. He stared ahead, not at anyone, not at anything in particular. Not defeated, just reconsidering. One of the fighters who had spoken with him earlier approached again. They exchanged a few quiet words. The heavyweight nodded once more, slower this time, and then opened the driver's door. He didn't slam it. He closed it carefully. That care lingered. Word traveled over the following weeks. Not exaggerated, not explosive, just steady. People who had been there described the same moment in almost identical language. The pivot, the stumble, the breath that broke. They didn't speak about violence. They spoke about control, and about how quickly confidence can shift when timing interrupts it. Years later, some would remember the event as dramatic. It wasn't. It was precise. The heavyweight had walked onto that stage expecting to test a theory. He left having felt it. There was no rivalry afterward, no public challenge, just a quiet adjustment in how people introduced Roos's name in rooms where fighters gathered. Softer at first, then with certainty. But what I remember most isn't the imbalance or the sound of that corrective step. It's the silence that followed it. The kind that settles over a crowd when something small rearranges what they thought they understood. Some drove home thinking about size, others about speed, a few about humility, and somewhere between the scrape of folding chairs and the closing of a car door, the room had shifted its weight. Not dramatically, just enough.